Hey y'all! So I know you guys are waiting for the watercolor or water soluble crayon comparison and battle, but while I was reviewing the Stabilo Woody, which I am including in the crayon battle for now, maybe I'll put it in the watercolor pencil one too. Well, two birds, one stone. I had noticed something. So when I was doing my individual reviews, I had initially started out with a water brush. However, I had some comments that, they should be tested properly with a watercolor brush instead. So I had started swapping over to my Princeton Aqua Elite. But while doing the Stabilo Woody review, I noticed that it dissolved and performed and looked better using a water brush. So it made me think, are all these other ones that I've been playing around with better dissolved with a water brush or a watercolor brush? So we're going to test it out and see if they've improved using, the method I had used in my test versus the method of a few different brushes. To make it fair, I'm using this watercolor brush. Now, water brush. Most water brushes are all nylon, cheap bristles. Really, there's not going to be a huge difference between brands there other than water output, and that's not a big deal here. Now, for brushes, I decided to get 3 different kinds, just to make it a little bit more, I don't know, crazy for me. So I still have my Princeton Aqua Elite because I use this in some of the reviews. But I also grabbed a snap brush. This is a little bit firmer, so I want to see if they do a little better with the snap. And then I got the Princeton Neptune, and this is just a round size 8. So these two here are going to be a lot softer, where this will be a little bit closer to the consistency of a water brush, but not quite. And then that way we can see if it makes a difference. So what I plan to do is I'm going to use the colors that tend to not dissolve well when I was doing testing or swatches. So that was like colors like a really nice rich red, dark greens, and then of course the dark blues. All of those seem to struggle with dissolving. So that's why I thought, well, let's use those colors from each of the sets. So for example, with the Neo colors, I'm just going to put this down, and I'm putting the colors, hopefully I don't screw this up, I'm putting the colors above the name. So I'll put it down like this, and then how I'm going to do it, comparing the different watercolor brushes, that's where it's going to get a wee bit harder. But see, for example, I'm just doing small little tests here. I'm not trying to go like mad crazy, right? But this will help me for the watercolor battle, because then I can say, hey, you know what? This one totally sucked with a watercolor brush, but it kicked butt with a water brush. And that's something you may want to know, because the tool you're using to dissolve or activate a color and its performance with that tool is pretty important, or at least in my opinion. So I am going to really quickly, because you don't need to watch me fill out this chart, I am going to go fill all these in with similar-ish colors. Some of these packs are a little smaller, so I'm not going to have exactly the same. But like I said, I'm going for those darker colors that dissolved really poorly using some brushes, and we'll see if this improves them or how they perform. And then this will just get incorporated into the battle results. So I will be back soon-ish. For me, it'll be probably 30 minutes. For you, it'll be literally like a second. And we're back. Okay, so I'll probably do like 1 row in real time, and then I'll speed it up, and then we can talk about the results after. So let's just start with the Lyra. Get my water brush nice and primed. We have planes today and not jets. I don't know what's worse for noise. So these dissolve really nicely with a water brush. Okay, water brush done. All right, let's get the Aqua Elite watercolor brush. And this is like a much softer kind of Korilynn style. So that's something to keep in mind too, is how soft and like what is your brush made out of or made to mimic, you know, because it's not necessarily the real deal all the time. They'll say like, you know, Korilynn sable imitation or something, you know what I mean. Here's the snap, which like I said is a little bit stiffer, but let's see how well everything dissolves. And I'm picking the colors that, or the color line that didn't typically dissolve as well, just to see if we're gonna have like a major difference. Okay, now I just need my Neptune. Sorry if you can hear the banging. They're building that school across the street and working on, I don't know, something loud with metal today. Okay. Alrighty. Oop, my snap bled a little, but that's okay. Alright, so right now you can't really judge them because we gotta wait until they dry completely because that's when the lines start to show. But color-wise, the color isn't bad. So I am going to speed this up because otherwise we'll be here forever. And then I will dry it with my Ranger heat tool, and then we'll come back and chat about what we see between all these brushes. So let's get moving. Okay, so let me zoom out, maybe. All right, so here we have the results. It's all crinkly and curled because when you use the heat tool, it does start to crinkle. So the Lyra, excuse me, actually dissolved better with the water brush than it did any of the watercolor brushes outside of the snap. It actually did okay with the snap, but I'm definitely going to say the water brush made it look a lot better in terms of vibrancy, and they dissolved on the paper a lot easier. So yeah, and then the snap is like kind of a close second. So if you only owned a brush, a watercolor brush, at least you knew. Now the Neos, again, I feel they did better with a snap, out of these three brushes. The Neptune didn't dissolve everything quite well enough, and same thing with the Aqua Elite. And then they dissolved really nicely here with the water brush. So that was interesting. The Staedtler, it just looks like crud. Or I mean, the Sargent Art looks like crud with all four options. But what would it dissolve better? I mean, for vibrancy, you definitely got better results with the water brush. And over here, as you can see, they're very muted and the lines are showing, but they didn't dissolve all the way here, like whatsoever. So I almost, again, I'm just going to say that these are better off the palette. No matter what you do. The Crayola, now check this out. Crayola actually dissolved a lot better with the water brush. Now here's the Crayola sheet. This is what happened when I was using the Princeton Aqua Elite, but see the lines left in the red here? Okay. They're still there a little bit, but not as bad as they are with the brushes. So I'm actually going to say that just skip watercolor brushes and use a water brush, and Crayola actually works. The green and the blue dissolved, whereas over here they didn't. The color came off, but the lines stayed. So that's really interesting. So yeah, you're going to get better performance out of the Crayola with a water brush, and they look way better. Okay, we've got the Staedtler ones. I had swapped Sargent and Staedtler. It wouldn't be my channel if I didn't have a oops. With the water brush, they did okay, but you can see there's some lines left. However, with watercolor brushes, they did absolutely awful. So I would actually say use a water brush or nothing. Water brush or palette for these ones. So I'm going to put palette here just to remind myself, because that's about the only way you're going to get something out of those. With brushes, they look hideous. Now, the Faber-Castell Kitty crayons, these ones. Check this out. They dissolved really well and kept their vibrancy with the watercolor or the water brush. So I'm actually going to say that, yeah. And here with the watercolor brushes, all three brushes, even the Snap, which is a little bit more, similar to the water brush, didn't perform well. But with the water brush, nice. And then the Woody, this is what had originally, like I said, if you watch my Stabilo Woody review, you'll see I had noted there was some discrepancies. So here's the chart. So here's the blues. See how much line is showing with that blue there? And see how much line is showing with that red? Now this was just using a watercolor brush. And then I did down here with a water brush. See the difference? So that's when I realized, maybe we have to also assess what you're activating them with. And it shows, because with the water brush, they dissolved perfectly. Whereas with watercolor brushes, the lines are there, the colors are muted. And that's also something to keep in mind. Now, these brushes here, these two specifically, are designed to hold a lot of water. Great for those juicy watercolors, but when it comes to dissolving lines, all that water sucked up into the bristles is going to mute down your color no matter what. Whereas this is not designed to hold water whatsoever other than the tank. Like it's barely damp. So you got to keep that in mind. Now the Snap is a little different. It doesn't hold a ton of water. This dries out a little faster, but still, it is a watercolor brush. It will hold more water here on the bristles than your water brush of any brand. So what have we learned here? Well, one, I'm going to have to, on all my worksheets, as I go back and fill them all out for the official battle results, I'm going to have to go through and note which ones I would recommend you use a water brush on versus which ones you use a watercolor brush on, and which ones just, for example, this one, should just stick to a palette and never be applied straight to paper. But I mean, the Crayola one was kind of interesting, and so was the Faber-Castell. And I'm glad that I had realized this during the review of the Woodies, because I had swatched the Woodies in the past and was really impressed by them and really disappointed during my review when I was using this brush here. And that's what made me realize, you know, the last time I swatched these, I used a water brush. So that's what we have to keep in mind as well. And oh, frick, that probably means in my watercolor battle and reviews, I'm gonna have to do something similar. Not like this. I will just let you know if it performs better with a watercolor brush or a water brush. I am not gonna go make a chart for, like, what do I have? 3 dozen watercolor pencil brands sitting behind me? Yeah, that ain't happening. It was fine with these because there's like, what, 6, 7? I don't know. So, yes. If you want to get the most out of these, the Lyra are amazing with the water brush. Neocolor, I have personally used with a water brush as well in coloring books, and they dissolve just fine. But now Crayola is back up in the running, and so are these cheap Faber-Castell ones, because look at that. It's all in your tools, y'all. So I hope this was helpful and you learned a little something about how the tool you use, which is true with just about any artistic medium, can play a role in the overall outcome of the product and the performance of that product. So, do you want to use watercolor brushes with your water-soluble crayons, aka watercolor crayons? You're only going to get away with 2 brands that you could do that with. Now, I know the Neo 2s do fine most of the time with most brushes because a lot of artists use them. So if you put them on watercolor paper, they'll be fine and dandy. But that is just something to keep in mind. And hey, we've learned something different. So now you know which tool to activate. I do have a question about doing another video similar to this, so there will be another follow-up video to this very soon. But in the meantime, hope you enjoy. I hope this kind of helped you understand which brands work better with what type of tool, and then that way I can incorporate this into the battle, which is up next, or in my queue next to film, once I fill out every single sheet for every single brand. This is going to take even longer for the watercolor ones. But thanks for hanging out with me, and until next time, take care. Bye now.